My goodness. Okay. It always takes me a hot minute to start the live streams. Um, anyway, we are doing a live today about something that I call the MAP method, and this is to give you some insight into how to teach students how to read. Um, and it's connecting, it's decoding and encoding, so reading and spelling. And this is really something that is drawing on something that we call the speech to print method. And so there are kind of two different approaches. They seem like they're very, very similar. I'll give a little bit of a breakdown of that. But there is print to speech and speech to print. So try to give you the easiest example. Well, first I'll explain a little bit. So when students that we work with have phonological processing deficits, so they're maybe not your typical learner. They're the kids with dyslexia, they're the kids with the phonological processing disorders. Um, for these students especially, though this is true for all students, they benefit from using the speech to print method because what's happening is they are they're building an association between the sound and the written form of that sound. The opposite of that is building an association from the written symbol to the sound. So it seems very similar, but I'll show you the kind of subtle difference here. And I'm just gonna share my screen. Okay. All right, so I'm in the Teach to Read blueprint here, and I'm going to kind of first give you a little bit of an understanding of the difference between these two things. So a print to speech technique would be, as an example, I got my pen here, as an example, if we took this word, um, shop, okay? And we showed this word to our students and we looked at it and we broke it down by identifying each sound that these symbols make. Hang on. Yes. All right, we had a last minute dog participant who wanted to come in. So we look at each one of these symbols and associate it with the sound. So our student is going to say sh, ah, and we are starting with the symbols first and then recalling from our memories the sound that those symbols make. Now, conversely, we have speech to print, where after having learned the spelling patterns for that sound, sh, we would then say the word shop and we would ask the students to identify the sounds that they're hearing. So sh, ah, and now we're looking at it and we're saying, what letter or letters spells the sound sh? And so the student is now not going into his or her brain to retrieve a sound. They're going into their brain to retrieve the symbol. So for a student with a phonological processing disorder, it is easier for them to start with the sound and retrieve the symbol than it is to start with the symbol and retrieve the sound. So, now we're going to retrieve that symbol. Shh. And then what is the letter or letter that spell ah, and that is O, and so on. Okay. Um, there's a lot more to this print to speech versus speech to print. I'm not really going to go in depth on that right now. I certainly can another time where I can provide some resources that explain it way better than I just did. But so this is all to say that the Teach to Read Blueprint is primarily a speech to print program, and that is because that is what is best for students who have phonological processing disorders and or dyslexia. Dyslexia is not simply defined as a phonological processing disorder. That's a little bit of an outdated definition. The IDA, International Dyslexia Association, is currently revising their definition to kind of include a more accurate representation of all that dyslexia encompasses. Nonetheless, there is that component of it. So again, this program is primarily speech to print. So that being said, yes, do we start by reading the words? Of course. We start by reading the words. We're not breaking them down at this point. When a new word list is introduced, I do have the students give me a cold read because that just tells me where are they right now in terms of their skills with this particular set of words. So for this, they would do their cold read, and in that way, so I get that information, and in that way, they have been exposed to what the words are, and they've gotten to kind of take a look at them already. And then prior to that, should have mentioned, there is the teaching segment, and this is the point at which you would practice with the student to um, shore up their understanding or give them the new information that this symbol spells a single sound and the sound is sh. You would practice with the sound and then represent the symbol. You would have them write the symbol and say the sound. So there is a teaching component first for this particular concept, and then you move on to this cold read. But that then brings us to the map method, and this is where we are going to put this into practice. So your student will have a whiteboard and a marker, a real whiteboard and marker. Sometimes kids do like to draw on the screen, and I do allow that. But for this activity in particular, I really want them to have the kinesthetic movement of writing and not dragging a mouse or their finger on something. So it's best if they really do have that movement paired with this. And so what you're going to do is you would tell them you give them an example first, but once you're rolling in it, you're going to give them a word, one of the words uh, on the list. Now I've got this displayed so that you can, as the teacher, can see what the words are for the week, but you wouldn't display it like this. You would nip that off so that only you're seeing that. So, okay, so let's say we're going to do the word ship. And for this, you would ask your student to say each sound, and we're going to make a sound line for each sound. So that's going to look like this. Uh, Hike that up a little bit. Sh, eh, ship. And they can write their own sound lines on their board. I've got them here ready to go just because they're a little more straight and easy to use. You don't have to, obviously, you can just draw them yourself. But you're going to call attention to the fact that they heard three sounds. Now is where you're going to ask them to recall the symbols that spell those sounds. And in this case, we've got a new concept, and that concept is that a digraph, a pair of consonants that spell a single sound, is the grapheme that we need to spell this sound. And so they're going to remember that. And I ask them to say the sound as they write it. So this is just a little bit of another layer here. So I want them to say sh as they write, eh, I want them to say each sound as they write it because they have heard the sound, they've retrieved the symbol. Now, as they write the symbol, and they have the kinesthetic movement of their hand writing the symbol as they say and hear the sound, this is really multisensory for me. That is what I feel multisensory. That's the type of multisensory experience that I think is valuable in this type of teaching. Whereas some other multisensory experiences they're valuable, but they are not as direct. They're not as directly connected to the process that we want to have happen. And so ultimately, and the reason that I call this the map method is because I'm referring to orthographic mapping. And orthographic mapping is this process of being able to automatically retrieve an entire word. Our brains do scan every letter when we read. It's hard to believe because we can't perceive this, but our brains do scan it and we automatically retrieve that data and say a whole word. And that is because those words have been orthographically mapped like a tattoo onto our brain through this process because we recognize those connections. So this way of learning a new set of words, doing it in this very specific way, is how you can enable your students to be able to orthographically map these phonetic patterns, these graphemic patterns onto their brains like a tattoo so that they can more automatically retrieve it each and every time. So it seems like a simple thing. We're spelling the word ship, big deal. But there is a process to it. And once you get the hang of it, once you've done it a few times, it will be very automatic to do it this way. So again, you're giving them the word and they are identifying the number of sounds. So let's do shack again this time, a new word. Um, so how many sounds is that? 3 sounds. Okay, awesome. So now I want you to spell each sound as you write it, and your student should be then saying ah, now, this is a digraph that we have learned in a previous unit, so they hopefully are able to retrieve that. If not, a little prompting might be in order. Okay, so they've said the sounds, and then they should say the whole word once they have completed writing it. That's a very important step as well. We don't want to forget that part. They've said the sounds, they've written the sounds as they say it, and then they say the whole word. And that's the process. And they go through and they do that with each and every word. And what you'll then find is when you get to your hot read, I have a fun activity for the hot read. So everything's a little bit gamified here. But when they get to their hot read, you should notice a difference in their ability to read these words that previously maybe they didn't know how to read all of those words. And you'll notice that we didn't practice reading them. It wasn't a flashcard situation. It wasn't being exposed to the word over and over again. It was exploring the word through connecting the sounds to the symbols. Um, so that's basically how you would do this, and this works for any words you're working with. If you have multi-syllable words, you can see this unit has kind of a whole demonstration that's even more intricate. But when you have multi-syllable words, you'll start with identifying how many syllables there are, and then you can come in with your sound lines on top of that so that it's broken up like this. Of course, this is much later in the curriculum, so not something you'd have to worry about immediately. Um, I just want to point out too, so again, this is primarily a speech to print program. There are some elements that are print to speech, though. There is it's a bit integrated, and I'll explain how and why. So there, at the beginning of every lesson, after some phonemic awareness work, the students will do this thing that I call the phonogram pop-up, in which letters, these graphemes, are going to pop up for them and they are retrieving the sound. So this is exactly the opposite. This is print to speech. They're seeing the grapheme and they're retrieving the sound. You do want them to have practice with both. It's just whether or not the primary focus is on one or the other. So this is where they are trying to retrieve the sound automatically and quickly. And so you can see there are a number of different patterns. When it starts to get a little more complicated, we do have a hint word so that they can read that and then notice the sound and then go back and pair the sound with the written symbol. And then after that, the activity is to spell the phoneme. So at this point, what the student would do is you would be saying the sound and they would be writing it. And for that, if you say the sound ah, for example, they can retrieve, depending on where they are in their knowledge base, they can retrieve the letter O because the letter O spells ah. They can retrieve the letter pair AU. They can retrieve the letters AW. So they might have more letter pairings or spellings in their aw drawer. And any of those will be correct. And you'll talk about that and you'll point it out. So in that case, you're not looking for a specific spelling. You're looking for them to be able to retrieve an accurate spelling. whatever that may be for that particular sound. So that's where it kind of pulls it back into the speech to print area. So that is really it. That was what I wanted to share with you about the MAP method and how that can work for you. So I know I demonstrated it with the Teach to Read Blueprint, of course. This is really useful if you are working with students online. But you can absolutely, of course, do this in person. All you need is your your mouth to say what you need, and everybody needs a whiteboard and a marker, or even paper and pencil, however you like to work. I really love a whiteboard and a marker. I don't know, it feels good, and I think the kids really like it, and it's easy to get rid of a mistake and not have it be haunting you as it's sitting on your page somewhere and scribbled out. So whiteboards are key. But anyway, you have these materials already. You can just go ahead and start doing that. And I would really encourage people to look into the differences between print to speech versus speech to print, how both have their place, but why speech to print is a more valuable method for students who have phonological deficits. All right, and that's it. Okay, thank you so much for joining me.